I have not had sex in months, the billionaire whispers to his therapist. That night changed it all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the quiet rhythm of another long evening in Manhattan. Inside a small therapy office, the air smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. A single lamp glowed warm gold between two people. On one side sat Logan Pierce, a man the world called a genius billionaire. On the other sat Grace Miller, a licensed therapist who had learned to listen even when silence said more than words. Logan looked nothing like the magazine covers that once praised him as the face of modern innovation. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. He stared at the floor for a long time, as if gathering the courage to speak. Then, his voice broke the stillness. "I have not had sex in months," he whispered, his tone flat, almost ashamed. Grace blinked once, but did not look surprised. She simply tilted her head, her notebook resting quietly on her lap. "And how does that make you feel, Logan? Beyond the physical part." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Like I am no longer human. I can buy anything I want. Jets, houses, entire companies. But I cannot feel anything anymore, not even desire." Grace wrote a few words, then lifted her eyes. "You said you stopped feeling after the accident, right?" Logan's fingers tightened around the armrest. "Yes, that night changed everything. The doctors said I was lucky, but I woke up hollow. My body works. My mind works. But it feels like someone turned off a switch inside me." Outside, the sound of rain brushed against the window. Inside, the glow from the lamp carved a soft halo around Grace's face. She spoke gently. "Sometimes the body remembers what the mind refuses to face. Trauma does not just live in memories, Logan. It lives in the muscles, in the heartbeat, in the silence between breaths." He exhaled shakily, eyes glancing at her pen moving across the page. "You make it sound like it can be fixed." Grace smiled faintly. "Not fixed, healed. There is a difference." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The lamp flickered once, as if breathing with them. Logan looked up, really looking at her for the first time. "Do you really believe that?" "I do," she said. "But you have to want to heal more than you want to hide." His jaw tightened. "What if I do not know how?" Her voice softened. "That is why you are here." The clock ticked again. The rain grew heavier. And in that quiet little room, a billionaire who had everything finally admitted that he had lost the only thing that mattered, his ability to feel alive. And for Grace Miller, that single confession was the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, the rain that had washed over Manhattan left the streets shining like wet glass. Inside the towering building of Pierce Dynamics, everything gleamed: polished floors, mirrored elevators, and people moving quickly, whispering the name Logan Pierce as if he were both myth and machine. But Logan did not feel like either. As the CEO, his every movement was measured, every look rehearsed. Yet beneath the tailored suit and the calm expression, something in him still trembled. He walked through the marble lobby, his shoes echoing like a slow heartbeat, and for a moment, the scent of rain pulled him back to that night 8 months ago, the night everything had gone dark. He could still hear it, the high-pitched scream of metal, the violent spin, the sound of brakes that never worked. He remembered the bridge, the lights of the city blurring into one long streak of white, and then the weightless second before impact. When he opened his eyes in the hospital, the world had color again. But none of it felt real. Reporters called it a miracle. Investors called it resilience. His team called it a comeback. Logan called it survival. Nothing more. Because after that night, the colors of the world dulled, the warmth of touch vanished, and every heartbeat felt slightly offbeat, like his body was alive, but his soul was missing a rhythm. He sat in his office now, high above the city. The skyline stretched beyond the glass wall, but it might as well have been another planet. His assistant knocked softly and entered. "Mr. Pierce, the board wants to confirm the quarterly meeting tomorrow morning. Also, Caleb asked if you are attending the investor dinner tonight." Logan nodded automatically, even as his stomach twisted. Caleb Ward, his brother-in-law, the company's chief operating officer, had been the first person he saw when he woke up after the crash. "Rest," Caleb had said, his voice full of sympathy. "Do not worry about the company. I will handle everything." Now Caleb handled everything, maybe too much. The company had grown even faster under his hand, but it no longer felt like Logan's. There was more pressure, more secrecy, more meetings about profits, and less about people. When Logan had suggested pausing a project that was causing burnout among engineers, Caleb laughed it off. "You are getting soft, Logan. You used to love the fight." Soft. That word stuck. It was the same word he used to describe himself when he looked in the mirror every morning, the same word that echoed in his head when he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling. He glanced at the small black notebook on his desk. Grace had asked him to write down 3 moments a day when he actually felt something, anything. He had opened it the night before but left every line blank. When his phone buzzed, it startled him. It was a message from Caleb again. "Dinner tonight. Investors expect you there. Do not make them worry." Logan closed his eyes and typed a short reply. "I have an appointment." Then he set the phone face down. Later that evening, the Manhattan traffic glowed red in the drizzle as Logan walked toward the brownstone where Grace's office was. Her window light spilled softly through the curtains, the same gold tone as before. For reasons he could not explain, his chest loosened as he stepped inside. Grace greeted him with a small nod. "You came back," she said simply. He sat down on the familiar gray sofa. It felt strange not to. She smiled, picking up her notebook. "That is a good sign. Consistency is part of healing." Logan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I tried to write in that journal you gave me. And? I could not find anything worth writing. I do not feel much during the day." Grace tapped her pen against the page. "Sometimes the absence of feeling is still a feeling. Write that down next time. It matters." He gave a quiet laugh. "You make even emptiness sound productive." "That is because healing starts there," she said softly. "You survived something that should have ended you. Your mind is still trying to believe you are safe." Her words lingered in the room. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Logan stared at the lamp again, the same one from their first session, and for the first time he noticed how the light fell on her desk, how it made the edges of his shadow fade. He said quietly, "Do you ever get tired of listening to other people's pain?" Grace looked at him with calm eyes. "No. Because pain means a person still wants to live. It means there is something left worth saving." For a long moment Logan said nothing. The ticking of the clock filled the silence. He nodded slowly, as if he finally believed her. That night, when he left her office, the air outside felt different. The city was the same, but the noise did not hurt his ears anymore. He stood under the streetlight, breathing in the cool air, and realized he had felt something just a flicker, but it was real. He opened his notebook, took out the pen Grace had given him, and wrote for the first time. "Today, I felt the rain." He closed the notebook, slipped it into his pocket, and walked away into the night, unaware that the small act of writing those 4 words would become the first step toward uncovering a truth far darker than his pain. The following week arrived gray and cold. The morning air in Brooklyn carried the faint scent of roasted coffee and damp pavement. Inside a modest apartment above a bookstore, Grace Miller stood by the window, holding a steaming mug in both hands. Her breath fogged the glass as she watched the street come alive with the hum of delivery vans and people in a hurry to start their day. She had been awake since 6, going over case notes at her small kitchen table. The files spread before her told stories of sleepless nights, panic attacks, and heartbreak. But one name drew her attention again and again: Logan Pierce. His case was different. Not because he was rich or famous, but because behind every word he spoke, she felt a kind of quiet exhaustion that mirrored something deep in herself. The aroma of coffee lingered as she sat down and checked her email. A message from Pierce Dynamics' legal office flashed on the screen, confirming the confidentiality agreement she had signed before taking Logan as a client. She reread the line that always made her uneasy. All sessions must remain off record, with no mention of the client's identity in any professional communication. The corporation had its ways of controlling the narrative. She closed her laptop with a sigh. The rent for her small practice in Manhattan was due next week. Her student loan statements piled up on the counter. Running a private office was expensive, but she refused to return to the hospital system where patients were treated like statistics. She believed in healing through human connection, not checklists. At 8:30, she stepped out wearing a beige coat and her favorite brown scarf, the same one her late father had given her when she graduated from Columbia. The subway ride to the office was crowded, yet strangely comforting. Everyone was chasing something: money, time, or maybe peace. By the time she arrived at her brownstone therapy office, the city had brightened. The golden light from the rising sun filtered through the blinds, painting soft stripes across her desk. She arranged the pillows on the gray sofa, placed a new box of tissues on the side table, and checked that the small gold lamp still worked. That lamp had become her quiet ritual, a signal that this room was a safe space, no matter who walked in. Her phone buzzed with a call from her best friend Hannah, another therapist who ran a community clinic in Queens. "So," Hannah teased, "how is it going with your high-profile client? The billionaire with the tragic eyes?" Grace smiled despite herself. "His name is Logan, and he is just another person trying to heal." "Come on," Hannah laughed. "People like him think therapy is another investment. Just remember, boundaries. Do not let him buy your empathy." Grace stirred the coffee on her desk, watching the ripples swirl. "I know my boundaries, Hannah. He is my client, nothing more. I treat him like everyone else." "Good," Hannah replied. "Just be careful. Power and pain are a dangerous mix." After the call ended, Grace looked around her quiet office. She knew Hannah was right, but she also knew something else. Logan was not like the arrogant executive she had met before. He listened. He asked questions. And sometimes, when he spoke about the emptiness after his accident, his voice trembled in a way that made her want to help more than she should. By early evening, Logan arrived for his next session. The same calm confidence followed him, but Grace noticed the shadows under his eyes. He looked tired, overworked, yet somehow lighter than before. "You wrote something in your journal this week," she said as he sat down. He nodded and pulled the small black notebook from his coat pocket. "One sentence," he admitted. "Today I felt the rain." Grace's smile was gentle. "That is a start." Logan leaned back on the sofa, studying her. "Do you really think it means anything, feeling rain?" "Of course," she said. "It means you are noticing the world again. Most people spend their lives too distracted to even feel the weather. You are learning to be present." For a moment, the silence between them felt almost peaceful. Then Grace flipped to a new page in her notebook. "Tell me about your week outside of therapy. How have things been at work?" Logan hesitated. "The company runs, but I do not feel part of it anymore. My team looks at me like a symbol, not a person. And my brother-in-law, Caleb, he keeps telling me to stop talking about mental health in meetings. He says it makes investors nervous." Grace listened carefully, her pen gliding across the page. "And how does that make you feel?" He smirked faintly. "Powerless. Imagine that. A billionaire who cannot control his own life." She replied softly, "Control is a myth, Logan. The goal is not to control the storm, but to stand in the rain and realize it cannot drown you." Something in his expression shifted. He looked away, his fingers tracing the edge of the lamp beside him. "You talk like you have been through something." Grace paused. She rarely shared personal details with clients, but for a split second, her eyes betrayed a flicker of memory. "Everyone has a story," she said. "Mine just taught me that people do not heal by pretending to be strong. They heal by being honest." The words seemed to linger in the air longer than they should have. Logan's gaze stayed on her, quiet but curious. He wanted to ask what she meant, but she gently redirected him back to his journal exercise. Before the session ended, Grace gave him a small assignment. This week, notice 3 moments that make you feel anything: anger, sadness, calm, anything at all. Write them down. We will talk about them next time. As Logan left, she watched him through the window, his figure disappearing into the fading light of the city. She turned back to her notes and wrote a simple observation. Client beginning to engage emotionally. Shows awareness of sensory experience. Trust increasing. Potential risk. Emotional dependency. She closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and sat for a moment in the quiet. The ticking clock reminded her that it was late, but her mind kept circling the same thought. She could feel his pain in a way that was uncomfortably familiar. When she finally stood up to leave, she whispered to herself, "Keep the boundary, Grace." But deep down, she knew this case would test every rule she had ever promised to follow. The following Tuesday evening, the city outside was soaked in soft rain again, and the sound of tires moving through puddles echoed faintly against the brick walls of the brownstone. Inside the therapy office, the familiar gold lamp glowed warm against the shadows, casting an amber circle between Grace and Logan. The air smelled faintly of paper, wood, and the lemon oil Grace used to polish the desk. Logan arrived precisely on time. He hung his coat neatly on the rack, loosened his tie, and sat on the gray sofa. His movements were measured, almost ritualistic. It had become their unspoken rhythm. A few minutes of silence before the session began, the ticking of the small clock on the wall, the low hum of the city outside. Grace set the small recording device on the table, pressing the red light that meant the session had officially started. "Welcome back, Logan," she said softly. "How was your week?" He gave a small shrug, his gaze distant. "Busy. The usual meetings, the usual faces. But I kept the journal like you asked." Grace smiled and gestured toward it. "Can I hear what you wrote?" He opened the small black notebook, the same one she had given him weeks ago. His handwriting was sharp, deliberate. He read quietly. "Tuesday. I felt anger when Caleb dismissed my proposal for employee wellness again. Friday. I felt something like guilt when my assistant brought me lunch and I realized I did not know her name. Sunday. I felt calm. I was watching the sunset from my balcony, and for a second I forgot about everything." Grace nodded, her expression gentle but thoughtful. "Those are all emotions, Logan. Even guilt and anger are signs that your emotional system is waking up again." He looked at her, a faint, almost nervous laugh escaping his lips. "Waking up? That sounds strange, like I was asleep all this time." "In a way you were," she said. "Trauma can do that. It makes people numb so they can survive what happened. But eventually, when the danger is gone, the body starts to ask for permission to feel again." Her words hung in the air, steady and calm. Logan leaned back, his eyes fixed on the soft glow of the lamp. "You talk like you have seen this before." Grace nodded slightly. "I have. Many people walk around half alive, convinced they are fine. But numbness is not peace, Logan. It is just exhaustion in disguise." He rubbed his hands together slowly, then looked up. "You said the body asks for permission to feel again. How do I grant it that permission?" Grace took a slow breath. "Through awareness. We start small. The body has to learn that it is safe again." She stood up briefly, walking toward the cabinet behind her desk, and took out a simple object, a small wooden box filled with different textures, smooth stone, soft fabric, a feather. She placed it on the table between them. "This might feel silly," she said, her voice even, "but I want you to touch one of these objects and describe what it feels like. The goal is to bring you back to the present moment, to your senses." Logan hesitated, then reached out and picked up the smooth stone. It was warm from the room's heat. "It feels solid, real." "Good," she encouraged. "Now breathe. Notice the air in the room, the sound outside, the light. Everything that tells your mind you are not in danger right now." He followed her instructions, his breathing slowing, the muscles in his shoulders softening. After a while, he spoke again, his voice quieter. "Sometimes I think I still hear the crash, the screech of brakes, the metal folding in on itself. It comes out of nowhere." Grace's pen paused above the page. "Those are flashbacks. Your brain replaying the trauma in an effort to process it. What happens when you hear it?" "I freeze," he admitted. "It feels like my whole body turns cold. My hands go numb, my chest tightens. I try to ignore it, but it never stops." She nodded. "Ignoring it will not make it disappear. The goal is not to erase the memory, but to remind your body that the danger is no longer here. When the sound comes, do not fight it. Breathe through it. Tell yourself, I am safe now." Over time, your nervous system will begin to believe it. Logan exhaled slowly, staring at the stone still in his hand. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," she said quietly, "but not easy." The room fell silent again. The rain outside softened to a whisper, like background music. Grace wrote something in her notebook while Logan watched her hand move steady, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Finally, he asked, "Do you ever get scared, listening to people's pain every day?" Grace looked up, meeting his eyes. "Yes, but fear reminds me that I care. It keeps me human." He gave a small nod, then smiled faintly. "You are not like most people I know, Grace. Most people you know are probably afraid of vulnerability," she replied. He studied her for a moment, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Maybe, or maybe they are just afraid of being seen." She closed her notebook and smiled. "And yet, here you are, being seen." For the first time since the accident, Logan laughed, not the sharp, defensive laugh of before, but a quiet, genuine one. It sounded strange in the room, like the first crack of sunlight after a storm. When the session ended, he stood, buttoning his coat, and paused by the door. You said the body remembers. What happens if it remembers something it should not? Grace's voice was calm but serious. Then we face it together, one step at a time. Logan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Maybe next time I will tell you about the night of the crash. I think I am ready. Grace smiled gently. I will be here when you are. After he left, she sat in the quiet room for a long moment, the sound of the rain fading into the distance. She touched the stone he had held, now resting on the table, and whispered to herself, "He is finally starting to come back." Outside, the streetlights flickered across the wet pavement, and somewhere between the hum of the city and the steady rhythm of falling rain, the healing had quietly begun. The week after that session, the city turned cold again. The wind carried the kind of chill that slid under coats and reminded everyone that winter was near. Logan Pierce walked through the lobby of his company building with his collar up and his thoughts far away from the numbers and presentations that surrounded him. He had promised Grace he would talk about the night of the crash, but even thinking about it made his stomach tighten. The memory sat in the back of his mind like a locked room. Each step he took toward her office felt like approaching that door, knowing one day he would have to open it. That evening, the familiar soft light of the gold lamp welcomed him again. The air in Grace's office was warm, the faint smell of jasmine tea lingering in the air. She gave him a quiet smile as he settled into his usual spot. "How has your week been?" she asked, her tone calm and open. He hesitated. "Different. I keep hearing things more clearly now. The sound of traffic, the rain, even my own breathing. It is strange, but it feels good." "That is progress," she said. "It means you are reconnecting with your body again." He nodded, though his jaw tightened slightly. "But I also keep having flashes, not dreams, just flashes of the night. Would you like to talk about one of them?" For a long moment, Logan said nothing. His hand rested on his knee, the knuckles turning white. "I remember leaving the charity gala. I was angry. Caleb and I had an argument about shutting down our mental health fund. He said the company did not need to waste money on feelings. I drove off alone. It was raining, and I remember seeing headlights behind me too close. Then the brakes, they just did not respond. I heard the metal scream, and then nothing." Grace listened quietly, her eyes steady, her pen unmoving. "You said it felt like the switch inside you turned off after that?" He nodded slowly. "When I woke up in the hospital, everything felt wrong. Caleb was there, telling me to rest, to forget it. He said it was an accident, but I keep hearing the brakes in my head. Every night." Grace wrote one word in her notebook, trigger. Then she looked back at him. "Logan, what happens in your body when you hear those sounds again?" "My chest locks up. My hands go numb. I cannot breathe right. It feels like I am back on that bridge." "That is your body replaying the trauma," she said. "Your nervous system still believes you are in danger. But the danger is not here anymore." He looked up, his eyes heavy but curious. "So how do I convince it?" "You do not convince it with words," she replied. "You do it through action. When you feel it coming, focus on what is real in front of you. The chair, the ground, the sound of my voice. Say to yourself, I am here and I am safe." The body learns safety one moment at a time. He exhaled slowly, almost a sigh of relief. "You make it sound possible." "It is," she said simply. For the rest of the session, they worked on grounding techniques, counting breaths, noticing the weight of his hands, identifying textures in the room. Logan followed every instruction carefully, as if trying to memorize a new way to exist. At one point, she asked him to close his eyes and picture a place where he felt completely safe. His brow furrowed for several seconds, and then he spoke softly. "This room, the light, the quiet, your voice. It is the only place I do not feel broken." Grace's pen stopped mid-sentence. She looked at him, her professional calm steady, but inside, something shifted. She had heard hundreds of confessions like this, but something about the way he said it felt different, gentler, more human. "Then we will use this room as your anchor," she said. "Every time you start to lose control, picture this space. The light, the sound, the stillness. Let it remind you that safety exists." He opened his eyes and met hers. "You are good at this," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "It is my job." "Yes, but it feels like more than that," he added. "You listen like it matters." Grace felt the air tighten slightly between them. "It does matter, Logan, but I also need you to remember, healing is about you, not about me." He nodded, but the way he looked at her lingered, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken. When the session ended, Grace stood by the door as he put on his coat. Try to keep writing in your journal this week, she said. Notice every small moment that reminds you you are alive. He hesitated, then smiled. I will, thank you, Grace. After he left, the quiet of the office settled back around her. She turned off the recorder, closed her notebook, and leaned back in her chair. The smell of rain was fading, replaced by the faint warmth of the lamp. She stared at the chair where he had been sitting moments before and whispered to herself, "Do not blur the line." But she could feel it already, the beginnings of an emotional tether, fragile yet undeniable. That night, as she walked home through the drizzle, Grace replayed their conversation in her mind. There was something about the way he had described the crash that unsettled her. The mention of the brakes not working, the headlights too close behind him, it did not sound entirely like chance. She made a mental note to look up the old news articles about his accident later, though she told herself it was only professional curiosity. Meanwhile, in his penthouse overlooking the city, Logan sat alone with the journal open in front of him. The first line still read, "Today, I felt the rain." Underneath it, he wrote 3 more sentences. I felt fear when I remembered the crash. I felt calm when I heard her voice. I felt alive when I left her office. He closed the notebook and stared out at the skyline. The storm clouds hung low, reflecting the city's golden lights. For the first time in months, he did not feel trapped inside the memory. He did not yet know that the fragments of that night, the rain, the headlights, the silences, were not just memories. They were clues, and facing them would uncover something far darker than trauma. It would uncover the truth. The rain had stopped the next morning, but the gray clouds stayed. Grace Miller woke before sunrise, unable to shake a strange feeling that lingered after her last session with Logan Pierce. His words kept replaying in her mind, the way he said the brakes had failed, the headlights too close behind him. There was something in his tone, not just fear, but disbelief, as if part of him already knew the accident was not truly an accident. She poured coffee into her favorite mug and sat at her kitchen table, the city still quiet outside her window. Her professional instinct told her to leave it alone. A therapist's job was not to investigate, only to listen and guide. But her human instinct whispered something different. What if he is right? What if someone did this to him? By the time she arrived at her office, the sky had brightened into a dull silver. She turned on the gold lamp, straightened the journals on her desk, and tried to focus. When Logan arrived that evening, he looked tired but not defeated. There was a new steadiness in his walk. Grace smiled as he sat down. "How have the grounding exercises been going?" He nodded. "Better. I tried what you said. When the sound comes back, I remind myself I am safe. It helps more than I expected." "That is good," she said. "Your nervous system is slowly learning that the danger has passed." He gave a small, ironic smile. "I am not sure the danger ever really passed." She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He looked at the window, where the city lights reflected faintly. "Something is wrong, Grace. I had the car checked again last week. Quietly, I asked a mechanic who owes me a favor to go over the wreck file. He found signs that the brake system was replaced just days before the crash with parts that were not from the manufacturer. Someone tampered with it." Grace felt a chill climb up her spine. "Did you tell the police?" "I did at first, but the case was closed months ago. No one wanted to reopen it. The official report says mechanical failure." She studied his face carefully. "And you think someone did this intentionally?" "I do not think," he said quietly. "I know. The paperwork for the replacement parts was signed off by someone in my company. The signature belongs to Caleb." Grace's breath caught. She had never met Caleb Ward, but she had read about him in business journals, a sharp, ambitious executive, married into the Pierce family. "Your brother-in-law?" she asked softly. "Yes," Logan said. "He handles operations, finances, and most of the contracts. If something happened to me, he would control everything until I recovered, or permanently, if I did not." Grace closed her notebook slowly. "That is a serious accusation, Logan. What are you planning to do?" He rubbed his temples. "I do not know yet. Part of me wants to confront him. Part of me wants to burn the whole company down. And part of me just wants to walk away and never look back." Grace leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. "Before you act, you need to make sure you are doing it from a place of clarity, not anger. Anger can cloud judgment. You need evidence, not emotion." He met her eyes. "That is the thing. I am not angry. I am tired of being lied to. And for the first time, I am ready to see what the truth actually is." Silence filled the room. Grace could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Her training told her to keep distance, to stay neutral. But every part of her wanted to tell him to be careful, to remind him that power, money, and betrayal were a dangerous mix. Instead, she said, "If you want to pursue this, make sure you have support, someone you can trust." Trauma does not just come from what happened in the past. It also comes from what you are about to face. Logan gave a slow nod. "Maybe you are right. I already hired a private investigator. Discreet, independent. If Caleb really did this, I will find proof." Grace watched him carefully. "Just promise me something," she said. "Whatever you discover, promise you will not handle it alone." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "You sound like you care." Her voice softened. "I do care, Logan, but caring does not mean crossing lines. It means wanting you to be safe." He nodded, understanding, though the warmth in his eyes made her heart tighten. "Thank you, Grace. You are the first person who has listened without trying to fix me or use me." When he left, the room felt heavier than usual. Grace stood by the window, watching him step into the drizzle. She tried to shake the unease building inside her, but the thought would not leave her mind. If Caleb really had something to do with the crash, then Logan's life might still be in danger. Later that night, Grace sat on her couch with her laptop open. She typed Logan's name and the word accident into a search bar. Articles filled the screen. Billionaire survives tragic crash. Mechanical failure blamed for bridge accident. But one line in a smaller piece caught her attention. Police initially suspected brake tampering but found no evidence. Investigation closed after 1 week. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her instincts had been right. Something was missing. At that same hour, in a penthouse high above the city, Logan sat at his desk surrounded by silence. He had spread documents across the polished wood surface: repair orders, internal memos, email threads. One of them bore Caleb's signature. The words blurred before his eyes, but the meaning was clear. The man who had stood beside his hospital bed, the man who had promised to protect his company and his name, might have wanted him gone. He reached for his phone and typed a message to his investigator. "Find everything you can about the brake replacements and who authorized them." Then he closed the phone and stared out at the skyline. Below, the city pulsed with life, bright, fast, endless. But in that moment, Logan felt a familiar stillness return, not from numbness this time, but from realization. He was finally awake. Back in Brooklyn, Grace's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a late message from Logan. "Thank you for listening today. You were right. I cannot do this alone. I will keep you updated." She looked at the message for a long time, her fingers hovering above the screen. Then she replied simply, "Be careful, Logan." As she set the phone down, she whispered into the quiet apartment, "Whatever this is, I hope you find peace before you find pain." Neither of them knew that the investigation he had just started would uncover far more than corporate betrayal. It would force both of them to face what healing truly meant when forgiveness and justice collided, and the line between professional care and personal connection began to blur. A week later, Manhattan's skyline shimmered under a pale winter sun, but the cold air carried an edge that bit through even the thickest coats. Grace Miller stood by her office window, holding her coffee with both hands, her mind heavy with thoughts she had been trying to quiet. Every night since their last session, she had worried about Logan Pierce, about what he might uncover, and about how far he might go once he did. She reminded herself that curiosity was not care, and care was not love. But boundaries had begun to blur in ways she could no longer ignore. When Logan arrived that evening, his energy felt different. There was purpose in his step, a quiet intensity behind his calm expression. He sat down on the gray sofa, and for a moment, the familiar silence between them stretched longer than usual. Grace spoke first. "You seem focused tonight. Did something happen?" He met her gaze. The investigator found proof, real proof. Her heartbeat quickened. What kind of proof? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document, placing it carefully on the table. A maintenance log with Caleb's digital authorization for the brake replacement. The mechanic who signed it confirmed it was done under his supervision. There is no question anymore. Grace's chest tightened. "That is serious, Logan. You need to go to the police." "I already did," he said quietly. They reopened the case. "But I also know how this will play out. Caleb has connections, lawyers. He will twist everything to make me look unstable." Grace leaned forward slightly. "You have evidence, and you have the truth." He gave a faint, tired smile. The truth does not matter when power is involved. People believe what they are paid to believe. Her voice softened. Then what are you going to do? He looked down, his thumb tracing the edge of the document. I have a shareholders meeting next week. I'm going to expose him in front of everyone. Let the board see who he really is. Grace hesitated. That could get dangerous. I know, he said. That is why I came here tonight. I needed to make sure I am not acting out of rage. I needed someone who sees me clearly to tell me if I am doing the right thing. Her heart ached at the weight in his voice. She wanted to tell him that she believed in him, that justice mattered, but she was still his therapist, and therapists did not take sides. Instead, she said carefully, revenge and justice are not the same. The question is, what outcome brings you peace, not victory? He looked at her for a long time. Peace, he repeated, almost whispering. That word feels foreign. Grace nodded. That is because you have lived in survival for too long. Peace is not a battle to win. It is a choice you make once you decide you are done fighting ghosts. Her words lingered in the room. Logan leaned back, exhaling slowly, his eyes softening. Do you ever get tired of being the strong one, Grace? The person who always listens but never gets to be heard? The question caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure how to answer. This is not about me, Logan. I know, he said quietly. But I think about it. You spend all day helping people hold their pain. Where do you put yours? She smiled faintly, though her eyes gave away a trace of sadness. I put it in the pages of a journal. Sometimes that is enough. He nodded, understanding. Maybe that is what connects us. We both keep too much inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The gold lamp flickered softly, painting both their faces in warm light. It was a fragile, calm one that could break with a single word. Finally, Grace broke the silence. Logan, whatever happens next week, promise me something. What? Promise me you will not let this destroy you. Exposing the truth is one thing. Letting it consume you is another. He looked at her with quiet intensity. I promise I will try. And if it gets too heavy, he paused, then added softly, I will come here. She wanted to tell him that he always could, but the words stayed caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded. That is what this space is for. After the session ended, Grace sat alone for a long time. The lamp still glowed beside her, casting a small circle of warmth in the darkening room. She opened her notebook and began to write, her handwriting neat but trembling slightly. Client is entering high-risk emotional territory, determined but vulnerable. Therapist must maintain boundaries. Personal countertransference detected. She stopped, staring at the last line. Then she closed the notebook and whispered to herself, Stay grounded, Grace. Do not lose the balance. Across town, Logan stood on his penthouse balcony. The city stretched below him in a sea of lights. The wind was cold, but his heart felt strangely steady. The pieces were falling into place, the proof, the plan, the confrontation ahead. Yet in the midst of it all, one image kept returning to his mind, the quiet warmth of that room, the steady sound of her voice, the moment she told him he was safe. For the first time, the idea of safety no longer felt impossible. It felt like something he could reach, if only he could make it through what was coming next. As he turned back inside, his phone buzzed with a new message from the investigator. Evidence confirmed, but be careful. Someone has been asking questions about me. Logan stared at the screen, his breath freezing for a second. He typed back one word, understood. The wind outside howled louder, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed through the night. And in that moment, both of them, Grace in her quiet office and Logan in his glass tower, felt the same uneasy truth settle in their bones. The healing they had begun was about to collide with a storm neither of them could control. The following days passed in a blur of tension. The city moved as it always did, fast, loud, unstoppable, but for Logan Pierce. Every moment felt like the quiet before a storm. The investigator had delivered his final report, and the truth was no longer a shadow. It was written in black and white. Emails, signatures, time-stamped orders. Caleb Ward had authorized the brake replacement, and the parts were traced to a supplier that no longer existed on paper. Everything pointed to sabotage. That Thursday night, Logan arrived at Grace Miller's office later than usual. The rain had returned, a steady whisper against the windows. He stood at the doorway, drenched, his face pale but determined. Grace looked up from her notebook, startled by the intensity in his eyes. Logan, are you all right? He closed the door behind him, water dripping from his coat. I have proof, Grace. It is all here. He placed a folder on the table, his hand shaking slightly. Emails, payment transfers, fake signatures. Caleb tried to have me killed. Grace's voice stayed calm, though her pulse quickened. Logan, please sit down. He obeyed, running a hand through his wet hair. He is denying everything. He said I am paranoid. That therapy has made me unstable. He is spreading it through the board, trying to discredit me before the meeting. Grace kept her tone steady. He is trying to make you doubt yourself, but facts are not feelings. You have the truth, and that matters. Logan looked at her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. You always say that healing is about facing what is real. Well, this is real, and it is darker than I imagined. Grace leaned forward slightly. What are you planning to do? I am going to present everything at the shareholders' meeting tomorrow morning, he said firmly. But I will not go there angry. I will go there calm. I will go there as someone who finally remembers what happened. Grace nodded. That is the right approach. But promise me one thing, do not let his lies pull you back into the trauma. Stay grounded in the present. He smiled faintly. You sound like my conscience. Maybe I am the voice you have ignored for too long, she replied softly. For a brief moment, the heaviness in the room eased. The way she looked at him, steady, unflinching, made him feel something he had not felt in years, safe in someone else's presence. He took a deep breath. There is something else. My investigator was followed yesterday. Someone tried to break into his car. They wanted the files. Grace froze. Logan, this is not just about business anymore. You could be in danger. I know, he said quietly. That is why I wanted to see you tonight. If anything happens, I need you to know thank you. For listening. For reminding me I am still human. Her throat tightened. Do not talk like that. You are going to be fine. He gave a small smile that did not reach his eyes. If I make it through tomorrow, maybe I will start to believe that. The rain outside grew heavier, pounding softly against the glass. Grace wanted to say more, to tell him that he was stronger than he knew, that he had already begun to rebuild the parts of himself that trauma had broken. But all she could say was, Logan, do not face this alone. Bring your lawyer. Bring someone you trust. He nodded slowly. I will. Before leaving, he paused by the door. You once said that healing does not mean forgetting what hurt you. It means finding meaning in the pain. I think I finally understand what that means. Grace's eyes softened. Then whatever happens tomorrow, you have already won something bigger than revenge. He looked at her one last time, as if memorizing her face, then walked out into the storm. When he was gone, Grace sat perfectly still. The faint hum of the city filled the silence, and for the first time, she felt afraid not for herself, but for him. She closed her eyes and whispered, please let him be safe. That night, sleep did not come easily. She tossed between worry and professional guilt. What if she had said too much? What if her presence had given him courage but also pushed him toward danger? The next morning, she awoke to gray light and a knot in her chest. She checked her phone out of habit, expecting nothing. But at the top of her notifications was a breaking news alert. Pierce Dynamics CEO, Logan Pierce accuses COO Caleb Ward of attempted murder during board meeting. Her breath caught. The article continued. Pierce presented evidence of sabotage leading to his near-fatal car crash. The board has suspended Ward pending a full investigation. Sources say tensions erupted in the meeting, but no physical altercation occurred. Grace let out a shaky breath, equal parts relief and fear. He had done it. He had faced the truth. An hour later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It is over. He is suspended. Thank you, Grace. I could not have done this without you. She typed a quick reply. I am proud of you, Logan. Take care of yourself. But as she put the phone down, something still felt unsettled. Healing never ended in a headline. It began with one, but the real recovery, the fragile, invisible kind, was just beginning. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The city returned to its rhythm. And in her quiet office, Grace turned on the gold lamp again, its light soft and steady, a small reminder that even after the darkest storms, there was always a place for warmth to return. The next day, Manhattan buzzed with the aftermath of scandal. Headlines filled every digital feed. Billionaire CEO exposes murder plot inside his own company. Reporters camped outside the Pierce Dynamics building, their cameras waiting for any glimpse of Logan Pierce. But behind the glass walls of the top floor, Logan ignored the chaos. He sat in his office with the blinds half drawn, a cup of untouched coffee beside him. The confrontation had been brutal but necessary. He had watched Caleb Ward deny everything in front of the board, his voice shaking as Logan presented every email, every falsified document, every trace of betrayal. The evidence was irrefutable. Security escorted Caleb out as the board voted to suspend him pending a full investigation. Justice had begun, but it did not feel like victory. For the first time in months, the weight of survival lifted, only to be replaced by the hollow quiet that follows a storm. Logan turned in his chair and looked out at the skyline. The city stretched endlessly, bright and cold, yet he felt strangely small within it. His phone vibrated a message from Grace. "I saw the news. Are you safe?" He smiled faintly and typed back, "Yes, it is over, at least for now." But even as he wrote the words, he knew that peace did not arrive with headlines. Healing was not a single moment, it was a decision made over and over again. Later that evening, Logan walked into Grace's office for what had become his first session since the revelation. The rain had stopped, and a quiet sunset glowed through the window. Grace looked up from her notes, relief flashing across her face when she saw him. "You look lighter," she said softly. He smiled, sitting down. "Maybe because I finally stopped running from the truth," she nodded. "How do you feel now that it is out in the open?" He thought for a moment. "Strangely empty. I thought I would feel powerful, vindicated, but all I feel is tired. I keep wondering why people like Caleb exist. Why betrayal always comes from the ones closest to you." Grace listened quietly, her pen still. "When people betray us, it is not always because they hate us. Sometimes it is because they fear what we remind them of, the parts of themselves they cannot face." He studied her face for a long moment. "Do you ever get tired of being wise?" She smiled gently. "Wisdom is just experience filtered through empathy. I have made my own mistakes." He leaned back, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You know, for months after the crash, I thought I was broken because I could not feel anything. But today, when I stood in that boardroom, I realized something. The numbness protected me long enough to survive. It was not weakness, it was armor." Grace's eyes softened. "Exactly. Sometimes healing begins the moment we stop blaming ourselves for the ways we learn to survive." Logan exhaled deeply, as if letting go of a weight he had carried too long. The golden light from the lamp painted a halo around them, the same soft glow that had framed every breakthrough they had shared. He spoke again, quieter now. "You know what scared me the most about losing control? It was not the fear of dying. It was the fear that no one would remember me as a human being, only as a name, a company, a number. You changed that." Grace's throat tightened, but she kept her tone professional. "You did that, Logan? You let yourself be seen? That takes courage." He gave a small, honest laugh. "Maybe. But it helps when someone refuses to look away." The silence that followed was gentle, not awkward. Outside, the last streaks of sunlight faded, leaving only the reflection of the lamp in the window. Grace closed her notebook slowly. "You have come a long way," she said. "What do you want to focus on next?" Logan hesitated. "I want to build something that lasts, not just profit. I want to make sure no one in my company ever feels invisible again. We are starting a foundation mental health support for employees, therapy programs, workshops, real change." Grace smiled, genuine pride in her eyes. "That sounds like a beautiful legacy." He shrugged lightly. "Maybe it is redemption. Maybe it is the closest thing to peace I will ever have." Before leaving, he turned at the door. "You told me once that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but remembering you were whole all along. I finally understand that." Grace met his gaze. "And you will keep understanding it over and over again. Healing never ends, it just deepens." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is not the end of the story. Maybe it is just the part where I start living again." She watched him go, the door closing softly behind him. The room felt quieter than usual, but not empty. On the table, the stone he had once held still rested where she kept it, a reminder of the night he first began to feel again. As she turned off the lamp, Grace whispered into the calm. He finally found his peace. Across town, Logan stood outside the company building, breathing in the cool evening air. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement, and for the first time in years he felt grounded not in power, not in status, but in presence. He looked up at the sky, at the faint glow of stars above the glass towers, and thought of the words Grace had said. "Healing never ends, it just deepens." He smiled to himself, tucked his hands into his coat pockets, and walked into the night. The world was still complicated, still imperfect, But this time, he was ready to live in it, not as the billionaire everyone admired, but as the man who had finally learned how to feel again. 2 weeks later, the world around Logan Pierce seemed to move faster than ever. His name filled every news feed, the billionaire who chose transparency over power. CEO exposes corruption inside his own empire. What should have been a victory had become a spotlight that burned too brightly. The public loved redemption stories, but the people inside his company whispered about weakness, therapy, and vulnerability. One morning, Logan arrived at headquarters to find his assistant pale-faced. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was an article from a gossip site with the headline, "Leaked audio reveals billionaire's private confessions from therapy." His chest froze. He pressed play. His own voice filled the room, raw and exposed. "I have not had sex in months," the recording began. "I feel like my body forgot how to be human." Every word he had ever spoken in Grace's office was being twisted, cut, and played for entertainment. Within hours, social media was filled with mockery, headlines, and judgment. The same people who had called him brave now called him broken. Logan's phone vibrated endlessly messages from lawyers, PR teams, and reporters. But the only person he wanted to call was Grace. When she answered, her voice trembled. "I just saw it, Logan. I swear I did not." "I know," he interrupted. "You would never do that. But someone hacked your files. The damage is already done." She sounded devastated. "They will think I failed to protect you. My license could be suspended." Logan's voice softened, even as his own anger burned inside. "We both knew the risk of being honest. But what they leaked is not shameful. It is proof that healing matters, even for people like me." There was silence on the line. Grace whispered, "You are handling this better than I am." "I am only handling it because of what you taught me," he said. "Do not blame yourself, Grace. The fault belongs to whoever tried to weaponize the truth." By evening, his legal team advised silence. His PR manager wanted to issue a denial, to frame the recordings as fabricated. But Logan refused. "If I lie now," he said, "I destroy everything I stood for." The next morning, at a press conference already crowded with flashing cameras, he walked up to the podium. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "Yes, the voice in that recording is mine," he said calmly. "Yes, I went to therapy, and I am proud of that. After surviving a crash that nearly killed me, I lost the ability to feel human. Therapy helped me rebuild that. If being vulnerable makes me weak in your eyes, then I am proud to be weak, because that weakness saved my life." Every camera clicked at once, but Logan did not flinch. "I will not sue the media for printing the truth, but I will use this moment to fight for better privacy laws for every therapist and patient. No one's pain should ever be public entertainment." When he stepped away from the podium, he did not look defeated. He looked free. That night, Grace sat on her couch, watching his speech on her television, tears quietly rolling down her cheeks. She had feared this moment would destroy him, but instead, it had become his turning point. For the first time since her license hearing began, she allowed herself to smile. Because even though her career was now uncertain, she knew the work had mattered. Logan had found his voice, not the voice of a billionaire, but the voice of a man unafraid to tell the truth about his own humanity. A month later, the noise had finally quieted, the headlines had faded, the cameras had moved on, and for the first time in years, Logan Pierce lived without the constant hum of crisis around him. He had rebuilt the company's trust, turned down multiple interviews, and redirected his focus toward something he had once ignored: peace. The Pierce Foundation for Mental Wellness launched quietly, but powerfully. It offered therapy programs for employees, scholarships for young therapists, and free counseling for trauma survivors. Every initiative bore a single inscription at its entrance: "Healing is not weakness, it is proof of life." On a quiet Saturday morning, Logan visited Grace's office for the first time since the scandal. The gold lamp still glowed on her desk, the same soft light that had once steadied him through chaos. She looked different, tired, but calmer. Her suspension hearing had ended, and though her license was under review, the public support from Logan's speech had changed everything. When she saw him, she smiled softly. "You look peaceful," she said. He chuckled. "I am learning to be, one breath at a time." She poured him tea, the same jasmine blend as always. "So, how does it feel to be the world's most outspoken advocate for therapy?" He smiled faintly. "Liberating, terrifying, but mostly right. I spent years pretending to be untouchable. It feels good to finally be real." Grace studied him for a moment, her voice gentle. "You found your voice, Logan. That is what healing looks like." He nodded. "And you found yours too, even when the world tried to silence it." A brief silence settled between them, warm and unforced. For the first time, there was no tension, no blurred boundaries, just mutual respect between two people who had walked through fire and emerged whole. As he stood to leave, Logan glanced at the small stone still sitting on her desk. He picked it up, rolling it in his palm. "I remember this," he said. "It was the first time I felt something real again." Grace smiled. "You can keep it, a reminder of how far you have come." He placed it gently in his pocket. "Thank you, Grace, for everything." When he walked out into the morning sun, the city looked different, not softer, but more alive. The noise, the movement, the humanity, it all pulsed with meaning again. For Logan Pierce, healing had not been a cure. It had been a return to feeling, to purpose, to truth. And as he disappeared into the crowd, it was clear that this was not an ending at all. It was the quiet beginning of the life he had been trying to live all along. 6 months later, spring had returned to New York. The city pulsed with warmth again, street vendors back on corners, jazz spilling from open cafe doors, and sunlight dancing on the Hudson. Logan Pierce stood before a modest crowd gathered inside the new Pierce Wellness Center, a place built from both pain and purpose. Behind him hung a plaque that read, "For those still learning to feel again." He looked out over the audience, employees, students, survivors, and advocates, and began to speak in the same calm, grounded tone that once only belonged to his therapist. 6 months ago, I stood in front of cameras and admitted to the world that I was not fine. I told the truth, and it nearly cost me everything. But the truth also gave me something greater. It gave me freedom. Healing does not erase what hurt us. It teaches us to live with it, to grow from it, and to let it shape something good. Applause filled the room. For a brief moment, Logan paused, his eyes landing on someone standing near the back, Grace Miller. She was no longer his therapist. Her license had been restored, and she had returned to her work quietly, without the spotlight. Yet she had come to support him, and when their eyes met, there was a silent exchange of gratitude that said more than words could. After the event, they found a quiet corner near the garden outside. Cherry blossoms had begun to fall like soft snow. Grace smiled as she looked around. "You did it, Logan. You turned pain into something that will outlive you." He shook his head gently. "We did it. You helped me remember what being alive actually means." She chuckled softly. "You would have found your way. Maybe a little slower, but you would have." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about that first night, the one when I said I had not felt human in months?" Grace smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "I do. And now I look at you and see a man who feels deeply, maybe too deeply sometimes, but that is what being human is." The wind carried a petal between them. Logan caught it in his palm, studying its fragile shape. It took losing everything to learn that vulnerability is not the end of strength, it is the beginning of it. Grace nodded. "That is the message people need to hear." They stood quietly for a moment, the sunlight filtering through the blossoms. Then Logan said softly, "Thank you, Grace, not just for listening, but for seeing me when I could not see myself." She smiled. "You did the same for me, Logan. You reminded me why I chose this path." As they parted, the city hummed around them, alive, imperfect, endlessly moving. Logan walked through the garden, the stone from her office still in his pocket, grounding him in the present. He no longer needed to escape his past. It had become the foundation of who he was. For both of them, the story had come full circle. It was no longer about saving or healing someone else. It was about choosing, every single day, to keep feeling fully, honestly, fearlessly. 1 year later, Logan Pierce woke to the quiet sound of rain against the windows of his apartment overlooking Central Park. The city below was alive but calm, the kind of soft morning that used to feel unbearable when silence reminded him of everything he had lost. Now it felt peaceful. He made coffee, watched the gray sky turn silver, and let himself breathe without urgency. The Pierce Wellness Foundation had grown beyond anything he imagined. It funded clinics in 5 cities, partnered with universities, and provided thousands of free counseling sessions each year. But the most important change was the one inside him. He no longer measured success in profits or power, but in presence, in how deeply he could feel a moment, a conversation, a heartbeat. That afternoon, he visited the Brooklyn office where it all began. The same gold lamp still glowed softly on Grace Miller's desk. She had taken on a new team of young therapists, mentoring them with the same calm strength she had once offered him. When she saw him at the door, she smiled. "You always show up when it rains," she said. He laughed quietly. "Maybe that is how I remember where I came from." She gestured for him to sit, and for a while, they talked like old friends. Not therapist and client, not billionaire and healer, just two people who had walked through pain and chosen to keep growing. As he stood to leave, Logan placed a small stone on her desk, the same one she had given him a year before. "I do not need it anymore," he said softly, "but I think someone else will." Grace's eyes glistened. "You kept it all this time?" He smiled. "Every day. It reminded me that healing was real." Cuando they shared one last quiet moment before he stepped back into the rain. The city glimmered beneath the soft gray sky, alive with noise and motion. Logan looked up, letting the rain touch his face, and whispered to himself, "I feel it." It was not just the rain. It was life, messy, fragile, beautiful, and completely his again. And with that, the man who once believed he was broken finally walked forward, whole.